Even before I knew the name Muscle Shoals, I knew the music. The history is just ridiculous.
I spent so many hours with these beautiful things.
The vibe of this place is alive.
Low-end cut.
Muscle Shoals is a place of magic. There's just so much that happened here. You can't even point to why it all happened. And kind of want to follow this through and follow this journey and rebuild an old analog tube console and make it a tool that'll solve problems in a modern studio. I don't even quite know what that means yet, so I'm looking forward to figuring that out and coming out of here with a really clear idea of what we're gonna build. Let's see, somewhere around here. Ah, there's Charles. When people come here and they don't know anything about Muscle Shoals, what's the quick version of why you tell them why this place matters?
The quick version is, have you ever heard of Aretha Franklin or the Rolling Stones or Bob Dylan or Bob Seger, you know, or Dire Straits? And they say yes. And then you say, well, all of those bands cut records in this tiny little town. And then they say, how is that possible? Rick Hall, songwriter, publisher, opened a studio, had some hits, and the group of guys that he worked with, you know, not unlike some other places like Motown and the Wrecking Crew that had this group of folks that could get a sound. People started coming for that sound. So those guys split off and started another studio called Muscle Shoals Sound Studio. So then there were two. There was Fame and Muscle Shoals Sound. And for about 15 years, everybody in the world came here for those two little studios in this tiny little town. Went up on Fame, where it all started.
Here we are.
This is it.
All right.
Let's do it. Thank you, sir.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Just looking forward to seeing you.
Oh yeah, we did. I think part of the story feels to me like, you know, the old and the new. It's like, you know, all the history that you sit on the back of, but you're pushing it into the future and doing stuff and treading new ground. And I feel that that's kind of what we've ended up doing at Universal Audio. It's like all this great legacy and so on, but we've tried to bring it into the, you know, take it responsibly into the future. So I'd love to hear about what was here. I'd love to hear about what is here. I'd love to hear about what you think happened to the console that was here, you know, and we think about it as audio archaeology, you know, the real history of all the gear and what was, you know, what it was. So yeah. It's just a thrill for me to walk into like one of your control rooms and see the speakers my dad designed in our front yard and bring those memories back to here and just think how it's all kind of woven together. Our fathers, you know,
right,
and what they were pioneering and just the imprint that they've had on music and all aspects.
Absolutely, absolutely.
One of the things I learned when I was here, both here and over at Muscle Shoals Sound, the first console that was in was a Universal Audio 610 console, which is something my dad designed, an old tube console.
When my dad built this studio, that was the first console here, and it was the first new equipment that he had.
Mm-hmm. And where did that console go?
Parts of it are in Jimmy Buffett's studio in Key West, Mailboat Sound.
So we're in Studio B right now.
We are.
And there is a Universal Audio console out there.
Yes, it was. This room was built in 1967, and that console was the first console in here, and it was bought specifically for this room. And the first people to run signal through it was Dwayne Allman and a incarnation of the Allman Brothers. It was, I think, J-Mo and Barry and Paul Hornsby.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. When we fired it back up and started using it, I asked the guys, I said, why in the hell did they stop using this stuff, you know?
Well, cool. We should maybe go check it out.
Yeah, let's do it.
So what's under the hood here? What am I looking at?
This is all components that could be purchased, different vendors. This Altec faders, for example, handmade pads, on switch, of course, Universal Audio equalizers. Even this Echo Send is a Universal Audio product, and underneath it's not just a pod, it's a pod and a transformer and the whole little circuit for that. So that was a very handy thing to buy.
It's amazing to think. I remember my dad, who's, during my lifetime, he spent more time doing electronic design than he did in the studio. He'd kind of like faded out that part of his career, and he was doing that. I remember we used to get together on Sunday mornings. He'd teach me electronics. And
Wow, nice.
I learned some of it. I'm trying to learn more now. But he talked about the concept of an equalizer in the feedback loop of an amp, and it sounds like that's what's going on here, right?
It's exactly. These are envelopmental equalizers.
That's right. I remember him talking about the envelopmental equalizer.
They're built into the feedback loop, and when you have no gain or cut selected, it's basically out of the circuit.
The preamp and the 610. How is that the same or different?
It's similar to a 1008 and a 508 built into
Built right in.
onto the circuit board. And by the time the 610s came out, you could buy individual inductors of whatever value you wanted. So the EQ is basically the same, but it doesn't switch the crossover point. But it basically is a 508 built without that expensive inductor. And they're all hand built. I'm sure your family's worked on those up. I've read the stories of being hand built upstairs at Universal Audio.
Yeah, I've seen those pictures. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so tell me more about how this is wired in.
Originally, the 1008s were in a rack, and we wanted to build them into something that could be taken away from the studio and, say, moved across the hall for a session. So we have 4 1008s in each of these boxes with the phase and phantom and a pad. On the back, it interfaces with DB connectors to this control surface. So the equalizers connect when you plug in and so on.
So how do these get used? Like when
I
you
use them every chance I get. I use them on every session.
Really?
I really do. When I first found out that we were getting these back, I expected it to sound old. And they're beautiful. It does not sound old. It was everything that came after these that made that stuff sound old, I guess. But they sound really big. They're really nice. And route them to the EQs, tape it off, label it up.
So you do use the EQs?
Yeah,
too?
absolutely. Yeah. And they're really nice EQs. They're really soft.
It's just amazing that stuff's still getting used. And
it sounds great.
Yeah.
It really does.
I mean, we still got to figure out, we know we got the modules, but we don't know exactly the topology or what we want to do. And there's a lot of decisions we need to make. And my goal is to go home tomorrow and not have any decisions lingering. Let's figure it out and get to work. And
That's great.
because I'm super excited about getting back here when we have the console built out and doing some recording.
I think it'd be awesome.
Yeah, let's do it.
It'd be awesome.
You got the right man on the job, too.
Right on.
Oh, shit.
Will and I have kind of taken on the assignment of figuring out what we're going to do with our modules.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what brings us down here. We want to rebuild the console from the modules we have. And, we're trying to figure out what to do with them.
Okay.
Maybe start with, how you came across this board.
2 years ago, we were walking by this garage sale and a guy said, "Hey, do you want some bongos?" And we're like, "Yeah, we want bongos, So I said, "Well, come on in the back." And we walk into this place and here was this console sitting just on a shelf. And I was like, "What's that?" And he's like, "Oh, that's my old board." And I'm like, "Well, do you want to sell that?" And he's like, "No, not really." But his wife was in the next room and she's like, "Yes, sell it." I made a couple phone calls to people I knew up in Nashville and, established what it was worth. And we made him an offer and he sold it to us.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, you don't come across these that
Not at a
often.
garage sale.
not anywhere, pretty much. So
when you saw it there, what kind of condition was it in? What did it look like?
Well, it first of all, it wasn't in this case. Right now, we just have it racked up as mic pre's. But it had these 10 modules, and then it had a little mixer, passive mixer off to the side.
Okay. So this was custom built for modern purposes. So maybe you can
Yeah.
run us through how it came to be what it is now.
Sure. My friend Cody built this case out of plywood just to house it for now. And then Greg Pace, who you're down here to see, built these input modules here where we have like pads on the input because these have very, very sensitive input. You have to be careful not to
We know all
overdrive
about that.
yeah, we came across it when we did our first 610 replicas.
So we have the pads here. We have the phase, polarity, and then phantom power here. And these are interesting because they've been modified. The guy who originally worked on this console was a guy named Paul Kelly, and he did a mod where you can turn up the echo send, and it's a feedback circuit, so you get more gain.
Oh, okay. So when you got it, that had already.
Yes, it was already that way.
So you somehow you learned through the process of buying this that it was a Paul Kelly serviced console.
Yeah, and he was from right here in Sheffield.
Yeah, his name keeps coming up.
Yeah.
We keep hearing his name. So what do you like to use it on, and how does it,
Man, the funny thing is that, bass players come in and they always, I just run them straight through, just put a DI straight in, and they're always blown away. It's like, how does it sound that good? It's just really clear and big. Surprisingly, it sounds incredible on Whirly. It's one of my favorite things to run through it. And then vocals, I have a Heiserman 47 microphone, and I have to pad it down. I'll just take it to like -20 because the output on that is pretty hot.
So let's see, I was just looking at you have 20, 30, and 40. I don't have my glasses, but.
Yeah, I'll put it to -20, and then, then the gain is about right where I can crank it. If I have to put a little bit of feedback in, I can to get more gain.
Our understanding is, this was designed before high output microphones. And so dynamic mics and ribbon mics were kind of what it was designed for.
Yeah.
Not that you can't pat it down like you are, but that was probably its original intent.
Yeah, I'm sure. When you pat it down, though, it sounds great. It like really opens up the top in a nice way. Mic pre's all have their own personality and flavor. Tube mic pre's sound different than, like the ones I have on my console here. So I like to just mix and match. Sometimes I'll use all 10 on a session. Sometimes I'll use 1 or 2. Just depends on the style, and what we're going for. The main thing I love about having this here is that this is what the consoles were in the Shoals back in the heyday. And the other thing that they had were the Scully 1-inch 8-tracks. And we got one of those too. So if people want to come to the Shoals and record like the Stones did, they can.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's why we're back here, is once we learned kind of how ingrained these were with the history here.
Exactly.
It's like this was the right place to rebuild our console.
Yeah. Well, I hope people come use it.
Yeah, right on.
Come on in, guys. Let me show you my little shop here. I think your modules have arrived. Very nice.
Awesome. Yeah, awesome. So, well, thanks for being game to get into this project when we don't even know quite what we're building yet, and be part of the kind of creative energy here to figure it all out.
It's fun to be a part of it. It really is. I'm really passionate about this old gear that's classic and misunderstood. A lot of people misunderstand, and they think these are just dirty and nasty, and they're really not. They're pretty hi-fi when they're configured correctly.
They're pretty high fidelity, you're right.
Where we want to end up with this is have, how many channels? I think we're going to go with 12 channels.
If we can get 12 out of
If we
these.
can get 12 working, we'd go with 12. Otherwise, maybe 8. And then we do want to do a mixer. But I think that'll be a subsequent stage to this project.
Okay.
But, and then the kind of old meets new idea, and we need to bake this idea a little bit, is make a little control surface, in the console so it could work with an Apollo and our software Luna.
That's a great idea.
And I'd love to remote it so you basically could sit down and record as if you're recording to that, that Scully 8-track tape or whatever. So and you'd have all the transport, and you could do everything here. How great to be able to do some tracking without having to look at a computer screen.
Oh, exactly.
Right?
And I reach for a mouse, and that's all you have. You could cut great records with 3 or 4 knobs,
Yeah, exactly. So, with 3 or 4 knobs, the echo send going to, it's not going to chambers, it'll be going to our version of Capital Chambers. You could be recording to our tape emulation, right? So
exactly.
There's just, I think it could be a really great, very musical, very, easy to use workflow. What we're talking about doing is, for the first phase of this, do the input channels and do the control surface, and then leave the mixer. And we could talk about if that's different assemblies that kind of bolt together, or if it's all one chassis and we just leave room and we design it out. But that's some of the stuff we need to figure out.
Yeah, we could just make sidecar to begin, That'd be great.
There's a question about the mod, and I'll say I want to hold on to the Echo Send because I think it would be awesome if we have that control surface. And again, we're running an Apollo. We could have a dedicated like Capitol Chambers running, and you just immediately send to that, and that would be pretty awesome to just have that there. But then the question is the input, and so we definitely want pads. And Craig was saying, you know, he's got what 20,
30, 40.
20, 30, 40, and he was saying like kind of the most he needs is 20. He would love it. It was like maybe 6, 12, and 18 or something like that, or maybe even 24. So I think we'd build that pad in. We definitely want phase and phantom power on each one.
Sure.
I agree. I think smaller steps would be a little bit more useful.
I agree. There was you know, when they did the Rolling Stones, Keith's guitar was so loud, Jimmy Johnson thought they were going to have to cancel the session because it was just blasting the board. And he remembered this thing called a pad that Paul Kelly built for him. And he remembered, Paul told me that if something was ever too loud, to put this in between the mic and the board. And he went out there and did that. And then he could get it under control. And then they cut brown sugar, you know, through the 610s. And they like a pad on the front. They like to be overdriven, or they can be overdriven.
Anything else on the circuit? Because I think we'll leave the Echo. We'll find some way to add in the feedback. We'll maybe look at a couple options on that circuit. And that's kind of it, right?
I like to draw that out and think about it. And it's really the physical parts. Where do you want to switch? You know, do we take this off and do we make a new thing that has 3 switches for phase? And
I mean, we should show you the picture of what we did on the plugins, and we had all of that in this area.
Well, if you take a look at the plugin graphic for the 610A, comparing to the hardware, you got the mic line switch, which is horizontal. We've updated it, so you got mic line and a phase flip and a pad. So you can go vertical with those switches potentially if that gives you more room behind the board.
That'd be much better.
Could this be multiple positions so you get a couple different levels of pads, so it's not just nothing or minus 20?
Yep. You could easily at least get a 3-way switch on any of these, right?
True. Yeah, you sure could. Well, I hope most of them will be okay. Some have been redone, and some of them are missing parts, but they look pretty good, you know.
I think we should start processing these because we know we'd like to end up with 12. And then I think at the same time, we should get 2 of these working, drop them in here, and then figure out all the mods that we're gonna do. We'll figure this out and mock it up or build it out. We'll figure out what we're gonna do with the Echo and the feedback circuit and get the input section and get 2 channels since we got this nice rack here. 2 channels just totally done. And once we like what we got, we say, that's it, and we'll clone it for all 12. And then meanwhile, once we get that nailed down, we'll figure out what the overlays, how we're gonna accommodate the switching and so on. I feel lucky to have spent time here in Muscle Shoals and seeing the 610 console my dad designed decades ago still in use. Since the rebirth of UA in the late 90s, my passion has been blending analog and digital and combining the old with the new. Now I get the privilege of bringing a vintage 610 console back to life. I can't wait to see it finished, and I think the future records made on this console will create a history of their own.